All right, here with Kyle Stark, president, Stark Contrast, but spent 12 years with the Pirates, vice president, assistant GM, director of player development, and then 3 years with the Guardians, assistant coach at St. Bonaventure. But Kyle, appreciate you jumping on with me.
Yeah, fired up to be here.
Hey, what were you doing before St. Bonaventure?
I was in school, so finishing up law school at University of Toledo and helping out baseball program there, and then went to St. Bonaventure and coached and got my grad degree,
Nice. What's your grad degree in?
MBA.
So you got your MBA, and you
Yep.
went to law school before that.
Yeah. Yep.
Was that kind
Yep.
of your track then to get into pro baseball?
I tell people that I always wanted to be a big leaguer, just like anybody that plays this game. And unfortunately, I learned way too early that that wasn't going to happen. And so I said, you know what, I need to do something to differentiate myself. And you think about this was whatever late '90s. That wasn't necessarily a popular track for non pro ball players to have experience there. And so I knew I had to do something different. I joke with a bunch of guys now. If you look at my resume now, you'd be like, you wouldn't even get an interview for an internship. But back then, law degree, MBA, coach in college, it kind of stood out a little bit. But it was all aimed at wanting to work in pro ball, work at the highest levels.
And then you probably had to take an internship with the Guardians then,
Oh yeah,
right? Like that was your only way in, right?
oh yeah.
Was
No,
to
when I got when I got talked with a few different clubs. Old school wrote letters to every team. Actually, got a decent number of responses back, which shocked me. And ended up Cleveland being the best fit, best opportunity. Just good organization, lots of really smart dudes, lots of really good opportunity there. And so I was going to go on as an intern, and then that was the same year they fired their major league pitching coach. I think it was in spring training. They moved everybody up. So they reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested in being our short season pitching coach?" Which again, at that time, that was not not normal. But I said, "Yeah, I'd much rather be on the field than in the office." It didn't work out. They had a scout do it, so I ended up starting as an intern. And people would always laugh. They'd be like, "Oh, law degree, MBA, you must be really smart." And I'm like, "I did all that, and I'm making $500 a month. I don't know how smart I am."
But it seemed like the Guardians at that point were kind of in the forefront of kind of the new age of things.
Yeah, Cleveland was I tell people, a great spot. And it's really continued. But like before I was there, I mean, John Hart was the GM, and you had, I think at one time, there were like 8 general managers working in that front office. And then when I got there, Mark Shapiro was the GM, Chris Antonetti, assistant GM, Mike Chernoff as director of ops. John Farrell was in the office, Ross Atkins was in the office, all guys that have gone on to be GMs or big league managers or whatever else. And very small office, very open to different ideas, different thoughts. Just if you were smart and talented, they gave you opportunity, and a really good mix of some, we'll say maybe newer thought, but also some really good traditional old school baseball guys. It was just a great foundation for me to learn, all over the game.
How do you get to that point where you bet on yourself? Like that's not a track at that point, but how do you bet on yourself? Like, hey, I can actually do this.
Yeah, probably some ignorance and some dumb confidence. I come from a rural town in PA. I mean, there's no. I didn't know any big leaguers, personally, or whatever else. I just was not around it, but I knew I loved baseball. I knew that the game had been really good to me, and I was just passionate about wanting to, try my skills at the highest level. And so some of it's probably irrational confidence, some of it's ignorance, probably. But ultimately, it was, hey, I want to pursue this and see where it all shakes out.
And it seemed like the path with the Guardians and the Pirates were similar as far as just changing culture. Just talk a little bit about that as far as changing the culture of both, because it seemed like you guys had a pretty good turnaround with both.
Yeah, so Cleveland was fortunate, went in early 2000s, so they had their amazing run in the 90s. Were turning things over. John Hart left, I think, to go to Texas. Mark then felt like, hey, we were going to have to turn this over. And so I was able to be there in that process. They had made a couple big trades already, had made the Bartolo Colon trade, had made a couple trades. So they had started to turn over that next wave of talent. But I was fortunate to be there and get exposure on the scouting side, the development side, baseball, all the different dimensions that go into building a championship organization. The cool thing for me that I noticed with Cleveland was they had a culture. It was the first place I'd ever probably been around where a group was intentionally talking about those, using those words and intentionally talking about values and how these things were going to to shape up. So I got to see it play out probably at a more mature phase. And then when we got hired in Pittsburgh, a chance to go in and actually create it. But Cleveland walking in the process of turning around, Pittsburgh going in and, hey, we need to turn around and getting a chance to experience that full process.
What were the standards they set
In Cleveland?
that carried over to
Cleveland. I mean, the common things that stood out with Cleveland was it was very much focused on the whole. So the collective mattered. Very much focused on process. Very much focused on doing the things that matter to increase your chances of success. Very much focused on being innovative. And I wouldn't say innovative in terms of trying to be different, but in terms of not being afraid to ask, why do we do this the way we do it? And not being afraid to say, hey, is there a better way? So those principles really, I think shape that. And those are still true to this day, still very close with a number of guys over there, but also influenced. I think I naturally gravitated to some of those ideas, but really reinforced some things as we went into Pittsburgh. Because when we went to Pittsburgh, we inherited worst team in the big leagues, lowest payroll, and worst farm system. It's like, well, we're not going to out Yankee this, so we're going to have to figure out a different way to do it.
I mean, how do you drop your ego with that, with the process of saying, maybe I don't know, or is there a better way?
Yeah, I think the cool thing is I think a lot of times when you get hired as a coach or a leader or whatever else, I think there's this sense that we feel like we're supposed to have all the answers and know everything. And the reality is nobody that's working for us or playing for us or whatever else thinks that way. Like, they're not expecting that. They're expecting you to care. They're expecting you to be competent, but they're not expecting you to have all the answers. But we put that on ourselves. And so I think when we free ourselves up to say, hey, collectively, we can get to the best answer. I have a role in that for sure. I've got to create an environment where people feel that way, but it's almost frees us up. Let's stop posing pretend and posture and acting like we've got it all figured out. And let's go work really hard to figure out the best way. So in some ways, I think it's checking the ego, but in some ways it kind of frees us up to say, hey, I got something to add here, but I don't have to be perfect, because collectively we can challenge status quo and maybe come up with a better way.
Is the key to that streamlining communication from bottom up or top down?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a huge part of it. I think to your point, I think the first part's creating the conditions for people to trust that, because I think every organization says these same things, right? Very rarely do I go into an organization and they're like, champion in some different idea. We talk about these things, but as a leader, have I really created this environment where people feel like, hey, my opinion does matter. Hey, we're not going to act like we got it figured out. Hey, we are really going to sell out to trying to get better every single day. And so if I've created those conditions, then a big part of that is the communication up, down, in all different directions. Because without that, then we end up getting siloed. We end up getting isolated. And then so the mistrust just overtakes, because what we're talking about here is really hard to do. And so I've got to create the right environment where we can truly trust it as we go live it out.
Do you think you could emulate that at the college level? Do you think building? So yeah, it'd be very similar at the college level.
Yeah, as I spend time at the college level, professional level, baseball, other sports, business, military, wherever the environment is, I joke around with people. I say, look, people are people. It's not like they're different. And excellence is excellence. Those principles that play out consistently show up in. Now we got to figure out, what does it look like for us? And each situation presents its own unique challenges for sure. But the principles are the principles, people are people. And so it can definitely show up in any environment. We just got to decide, okay, what does it look like for us in this specific environment?
With the limited resources with the Pirates, how do you handle that? Because there's always going to be that noise, and there's still that noise. Well, they don't have as much as everybody else. How do you battle that?
Yeah, I think the noise has never gotten louder, right? I
mean,
exactly.
Yes.
I keep telling people at some point we got to run out of money, right? And I don't know that we've seen that yet. But I think it is an acknowledgement of, we can't lie to ourselves and say money doesn't matter. It does. Resources definitely matter. But at the same time, we also can't get deterministic and say that resources will win the day and automatically. And I just, there's plenty of examples where can out people and out process other organizations. You get the right people and have the right processes in place that maximize people. I think one of the things that we tend to maybe miss today, forever, it was always about the team, right? I mean, Bo Schembechler's speech, the team, the team, the team. And I think as we've gotten smarter and have broken all the things down to component parts and we've maximized those parts, we think they'll just magically come together. And no, it still comes back to the team, the team, the team. How do those parts interact with each other? And so the best leaders, the best organizations, the best coaches figure out figure out how those things come together to leverage those. And that's where you see those marginal gains. You see those differences in terms of resources. Again, it doesn't mean that anybody can do it anywhere. It doesn't mean that that the resources don't matter. But resources, ultimately what they do is they just give us more margin for error. And so as you remove resources, we just have to be that much better. And you either see that as an opportunity that you really like, or you see it as a threat that paralyzes us.
Do you think the Rays are the best example we have in the big leagues?
I think the Rays are a great example. I think Cleveland continues to be a great, these organizations that you're talking about a decade of doing it and not just doing it the same way, continually trying to find different ways. Because the interesting thing is, as we're a copycat business. So as soon as somebody does something good, we're like, oh, that's the answer. We're going to copy it. So these secrets don't last long, which means we have to constantly be in this pursuit of, hey, is there a better way to do it? Hey, how can we do this better? Hey, how are we growing and learning as we go through it?
Yeah, but isn't it at that point you might be too late, right?
100%.
Don't you have to be the first in? Like if you're waiting for somebody else to do it, by the time you end up doing it and implementing it, it's probably too late.
Well, and here's the thing where resources come into play, right? Where if I have resources, I've got a bigger margin for error. I don't have to be first to the race. Yep. If I don't have resources, then I do have to be, and I don't even necessarily know that first, because sometimes first isn't the right answer either. Because sometimes it's better to let somebody else go through the door first and realize, hey, that didn't work. We can learn from them. I've certainly been guilty of that. But I do think it requires some more boldness to take some more risks, which can be hard when you don't have resources. You don't feel like you've got a net. Well, that's the very thing that requires us to make sure that we take some of those chances because we have to.
How'd you handle that next job? Because obviously you're good at the one you're in, but then the next job's going to provide different challenges. How do you get over that hump of, okay, you're prepared for the job you're in, but now you're moving to a new job? How'd you handle that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And probably if you ask some people, they'd say great. And some people probably say not so great. Because I think there's lessons learned. And I think the biggest lesson is the very one you mentioned in terms of it's the whole idea of what got me here is not going to get me there. So it's like, hey, I think when people realize that the promotion, the next job you're getting is not an addition of resources. It's a new job. It's a different job. I've been around some really good assistant coaches that became head coaches. It's like, wow, this is a completely different job, or assistant GM to GM or whatever else it may be. But I think we think that it's just going to be an addition of responsibilities. And it's a completely different job. And some of the things that we loved about our current job, when we go to the next job, we're like, wow, that's not there anymore. And I miss some of that. So I think that the quicker we can realize those things and realize the higher up you go, the further you progress, the less it is about your performance and more about creating the conditions and the environment for others' performance. And that's hard for us to do because a lot of us are athletes, we're achievers, we want to perform. And the further you go, the more you realize, hey, this is less about my performance and ultimately trying to support and create the right environment for other people to go perform.
Yeah. How do you delegate?
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's a great question. I think part of this perspective is recognizing what are we really signing up for. Was fortunate in Cleveland to work with Carl Willis, the Major League pitching coach who's still there or has gone back there. And I learned a ton from Carl. He's coached a number of Cy Young Award winners, very different. Is able to work with a lot of different players and get the most out of them. And Carl and I used to always joke about, when he became the Major League pitching coach, and he'd talk about some of the headaches he had to navigate. And I'd say, so you want to be a Major League pitching coach? And then when I got hired as a farm director in Pittsburgh, I'd call him and be like, man, can you believe I'm dealing with whatever? And he's like, so you want to be a farm director? But I think what that does is you start to realize, okay, what is the job really, as opposed to what did I think it was? And then you can start to say, okay, what are the things that only I can do? Well, I need to make sure I'm crushing those. These other things, even though maybe I can do them better or whatever else, I need to start distributing those to other people, which comes back to trying to grow and get better too. Is I know when I give somebody else something for the first time, they're probably not going to do it great. So can I create an environment where people can learn from it, continue to grow and continue to get better? But ultimately then to check myself, have I prepared the people I'm leading for the tasks I'm giving them? And I think a lot of times as coaches and leaders, we'll give a task to an assistant or somebody else and they won't do it well. And then we get mad at them. It's like, hey, did I properly prepare them? And a lot of times I didn't. I just dumped it on their plate and expected them to deliver really well.
Do you feel like the onboarding then got better for you as you went along?
Yeah, because I think you start to gain better clarity of what matters most, right? And how you want things done. And so that level of expectation and detail, just it continues to refine. I've been fortunate to spend some time with some really elite leaders and, some guys that are legends in their coaching profession. And they're a different coach today than they were 30 years ago because they continue to just better understand what matters to me, what's most important to me, how do I prepare others for this? And that system just continues to get refined over time.
What was the most challenging job you had out of all those? Is farm director the hardest job?
It probably is. It's probably also my most rewarding. I loved every day was, you start talking about a few hundred players and a couple hundred staff members. Like every day we're in the people business. Every day there's a people problem. Somebody did something, somebody's navigating something, somebody's having a bad day, something. So just the moving parts, they call the farm director the fireman because you're putting out a lot of fires. But I think what that job did was, number one, it forced you to have to be a really good leader because there's so many spinning plates. I think it forced you to have to figure out how do you replicate this across things because you're talking about, 8, 9 teams and multiple countries. And so how do we do that? What really matters? How do we replicate it? But I think the other thing that job does is it forces you to have to decide what's most important. The whole urgent versus important thing. Like I could spend my whole day just putting out fires, or I can start to manage my day in such a way that's like, hey, what really matters? What are some other things that other people can tackle? It just forces you to all the buzzwords we talk about as a leader. It forces you to have to figure out, or you're just drinking from a fire hose and you're only doing it for a short period of time.
What do you think Major League Baseball is getting right about player development right now?
That's a great question. I think, it's funny. I was talking with a coach this morning and we were chopping up the landscape. And I think in a lot of ways, I think we've advanced parts of development better than ever. I mean, there's aspects and dimensions of development that there's no question we're doing better. I don't know that we can say that we're getting the whole better. And I think part of it's because we look out and we say, hey, there's some challenges with the product. And that's not just a Major League Baseball thing. That's just development across the board, top to bottom within the game. I think, again, we've advanced some specific things. But within that, we end up potentially taking some lessons from that and saying, well, that's the answer. Well, that's the answer after a guy's been playing for 15 years and he's in the big leagues. That may or may not be an answer, further away. Or we say, hey, if he can do this, if a pitcher X can do this specific thing, he's going to be better. Yeah, in isolation, but what happens when the league adjusts? What happens when some of these different things happen? So I think we have advanced specific aspects of development just because of the information we're getting, how we're using that information, the tools we're getting. I think some foundational things we've maybe gotten away from, and I think it shows up and causes some challenges for us. And when I say foundational things, I'm not just talking about on field. I'm talking about just some coaching foundations that we can probably learn from some guys that have come before us.
What is that, though? What are some of those coaching foundations?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was having a conversation with a coach here recently. And we said, back in the day, you cut your teeth as a coach. A lot of times working camps, and those were free reps to figure out different ways to say things, different ways to cue, different drills to try, and really as you came up. A lot of the debate on coaching was cues and drills. Like, what drills did you use? Which cues did you use? How many different ways could you do that? I think old school coaches have potentially gotten labeled as stuck in their ways. I think old school coaches actually had a million ways to do things, and they saw every player as an individual, and we're going to figure it out. Generally, obviously, there's examples of not the case. But you have that foundation of just knowing this kid in front of me, what does he need? what are the principles I need to know, but then what does this kid need? And I think as we've gotten better with some more information, I think there's a false sense of precision. Well, if I just tell them the right thing, it will get the result I want. And information ain't transformation. Information helps us inform to figure out how to get transformation. But I think some of those reps further away of understanding development at the lowest level, of understanding this kid who maybe doesn't even want to be there. How do I get him engaged? How do I navigate motivation challenges? All the things you have to learn when you're not dealing with the best player who's the most motivated. Those guys are way easier to coach than all those other guys.
But is that the biggest X factor with player development is when teams adjust or the game adjusts to you being able to make those adjustments?
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest X factor. I think it still comes back to it's a people business, and how well do I get people? How well do I understand people? How well do I navigate people? How well can I navigate this kid in front of me, this young man in front of me who shows up different than he did yesterday? And it's like, what's going on? Well, he's 18. That's what's going on. So I still think that's the biggest X factor. I think the next one then becomes similar to what we were talking about with the farm director thing. As we get better information and more information, how do I have a foundation that allows me to process that, decide what's most important, decide what does this kid need? Or am I just continuing to seek more and more and more? The best I've ever been around are in a process of refinement, which is reduction and getting rid of. And I think a lot of times as coaches and leaders on the way up, it's like more and more and more. The answer's got to be more. Players, same way. The answer's I just got to need to do more. And the best in the world get to a spot where they're like, you know what? I need to start refining, reducing, and narrowing my scope. And the only way we can do that is if we've gotten some reps and experiences, stubbing our toe, figuring out what doesn't work, whatever else.
The Power of Less is one of my favorite books, by the way.
Very good. The Power of Less is a good one. One thing is a good one, but this idea of continuing to and we can overplay that, right? Where we can be like, oh, this one thing's the answer. No, it isn't. But the ability for us to, I've used the which is a biblical example, but the idea of pruning a tree in order to get it to grow, that means I got to get rid of stuff, not just add more.
How do you balance that, though, in player development? Because obviously you want guys to develop, but not at the expense of teaching them how to win, too. Because that's always the thing that I think about, like that, what professional baseball has to go through is, yes, we are trying to develop, but we also have to teach them how to win, too. Because Jamie Carroll and I talk about that. Winning baseball is a skill.
Yes.
Like learning how to win baseball games as a player is a skill.
Yep. And I love the Jamie Carroll reference because I think Jamie's career are so many development lessons. Jamie Carroll, first of all, doesn't get drafted today. Jamie Carroll does not get the opportunities that Jamie Carroll got. And again, if you look at the things we say matters most today, I don't know that Jamie Carroll gets those opportunities. Yet he ended up playing in the big leagues for 12 years and was playing shortstop every day at 40 years old. Like there's something different about that guy. But I think as we talk through that, I think when we think about, first of all, I agree with you that a huge part of development is winning baseball. I'd argue that actually the goal of development is winning baseball, right? I mean, at the end of the day, and this was something that we try to preach in Pittsburgh. I'm not trying to develop big leaguers. We're trying to develop a championship team in Pittsburgh. Yeah. Which means how do the pieces all fit together? Which means how do players understand not just skills in isolation, but situational aspects of this? Have we developed a robust, anti-fragile player who can handle a lot of different stuff thrown at them? And I think so. I think when we start saying winning and development, again, you can't serve two masters. I'm going to pick one or the other. And for the individual player, he's going to think about his own development. I think a lot of our development, too, can become a little bit theoretical about where we'll throw out an ideal buzzword idea and we forget, but it's in the context of a team or an organization. And how do all these things fit? I've joked organizations, different leaders I'll talk to, they'll say something about, this is an example, but they'll say, hey, player centric. If you mean player-centric, meaning that the coach cares more about the player's career than their own career, I'm in. But if we think an organization is player-centric, well, no, it's organization-centric. It's teams. We're trying to build a team. And so if you take that player-centric thing too far, then we've got two shortstops on the roster. If I'm doing player centric, they both should play. Well, the reality is I have to pick and choose and give opportunities. And ultimately, those things then should come down to, at the end of the day, good development is winning baseball. It should be aimed at that. We should be teaching these lessons all the time. Otherwise, I would argue, is it really good development if it doesn't lead to that?
Can you develop anti-fragility?
Yeah, well, I definitely think you can. I think the older we get in life, the harder it is to do. And this is where like none of us come out of the womb anti-fragile and tough and everything else. So we are a product of our experiences. There's some psychological things that can help just, the nature versus nurture. But the vast majority of this is way more nurture and environment. And so I think this is why college coaches try to pick young men who come from families where they've already learned this, why pro teams are scouting players where they've already learned these skills. But I do think we are such a productive environment. I mean, you and me can get comfortable in a hurry if we're in society, as opposed to an environment that's challenging us to navigate some adversity, navigate some there's a book called The Comfort Crisis that's awesome about this. It just talks about this idea of we live in a very comfortable society, and we've gotten soft in a lot of different ways, as opposed to how am I navigating hard? Am I seeing these things as opportunities to sharpen me, to grow me? So definitely think we can develop it. I think the best coaches very much develop not only players who are, but develop teams and systems that are.
What do you feel like the best piece of technology that's come out here in the last 15 years?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Could be player development or could be personal, like things you've used technology-wise too.
Yeah, I think let me give a little bit of a general answer, then we can drill down from there. I think anything that increases awareness that's aimed at the ultimate thing we're trying to do is an awesome tool. I think anything that just is measuring for measurement's sake or is creating false senses of what matters most can be dangerous. So I would say that my answer to that question is ultimately it's less about the tool and more about the person using it and how am I using these tools as opposed to whether I am or not. I would argue that a coach or an organization, and I think there's lots of examples of this in the college game, would be better off not using it than using it incorrectly. It's just easy for us to become slaves to the tool or to the measurement, and we miss the ultimate outcome. Again, it's coming back to the whole development and winning. If it doesn't point at winning baseball, then we're misusing it. Quick sidebar on this topic, and I think it brings this to light. This tension between old school, new school, or tech, no tech. I think if the first tech that came out would have rolled out under in the way of sitting down with a Carl Willis and saying, "Hey, what are you assessing? Hey, if I told you I could measure that, would that be helpful to you?" I don't know a coach that wouldn't use that. But as soon as we say, "Hey, I have a tool that's going to either make you obsolete or answer your question or fix everything because you don't know what you're looking at," well, then no question we got tension.
Yep.
So I use that as an example. I think when we whatever the tool is, do I understand how it fits for me, what matters most to me, and do I make sure that the measurement is aimed at what's ultimate and not fall into this place, well, you have to measure it in order, why guess when you can assess? I agree, but we got to make sure we're measuring the right things in the right ways and not think that that's going to provide all the answers necessarily.
And then the art of that is whittling all that information down to figure out what you want to disseminate to the player.
100%. Because again, it comes back to, I think, where we can fall into this trap where we think teaching is, information is transformation. No, information helps us inform how do I best need to present this information, present this lesson, teach this drill in order for some behavior change to happen. I just think a lot of times as coaches, we think about learning way too linear, like if X, then Y. And there's a million variables that go into that. I think when we understand that system is way more complex than that, then it's not that I don't want information, I very much do, but it's to then inform how do I then adjust the system to create some of the outcomes that we want to have.
What are your tips for coaching coaches?
I think, great question. And it's one I'm passionate about because I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of times we cheapen coaching because we're like, hey, here's this tool, it'll fix this or whatever else. And we're like, no, this person that's this shepherd as I go through this is absolutely critical. I think we cheapen coaching sometimes in terms of what we think it is. Like, it's not just telling people stuff. Like, that's, I think we've got scouts and analysts that say, hey, here's the problem. I think coaches need to figure out, okay, well, how do we then solve for that problem? So with all of that, because of how we view coaching, I think a lot of our coaches, resources, and tools are aimed at those things. Not that those things don't matter, they do. But I think more importantly as a coach is I need to understand a few things. I think we need to understand, number one, that more is caught than taught. So am I modeling the things that, like, if I want to develop an anti-fragile team, am I an anti-fragile individual? If and there's an old school coaching maxim of the team takes on the identity of the coach. Well, am I being the things I want to see created consistently? So consistency of who I am and what matters to me, number one. And I don't think we can ever spend enough time as a leader, as a coach, trying to evolve and develop and grow those things. I think the second part of coaching coaches is understanding this results and relationships piece, this mission and people piece. Like, I need to understand both of those variables, understand my bias towards one or the other, and recognizing that I've got to be able to do both. I've got to be able to people and process both. And then I think the third piece that's important for coaches is just this idea that development, coaching, teaching, learning is way messier than we think. And I need to be okay being in messy. Learning requires failure. Am I okay with failure? Learning requires trial and error. Am I okay with trial and error? Learning requires reps and reps and reps and reps and reps until the light goes on. Am I okay with that? Learning involves two imperfect people navigating them. Am I okay? So as a coach, am I secure in my own skin navigating this mess? Or do I want to try to clean it up, rush the process, and be the answer? If so, then we're probably going to shortchange development.
How do you challenge your own biases?
I think it's number one, it's being able to ask the question, what if I'm wrong? And if I can go into everything, what if I'm wrong? It forces me to potentially consider some other thoughts, some other perspectives, some other ways of doing it. I think number two is if I truly have a mindset of trying to get better every day, then I should be seeking out results that potentially challenge some things that say, hey, are you on the right thing? Hey, could you do it better? And then I think the third piece as a leader that's absolutely critical is, have I surrounded myself with truth tellers? Do I have a board of directors, Mount Rushmore, Knights of the Round? Do I have a posse that I value, that are smarter than me, that will speak truth and challenge me? And if so, then not that we're going to fix all this because we all got our own issues, but it helps increase the chances of constantly pursuing and challenging assumptions.
And that's to drop the ego thing too.
100%. 100%. And again, if I see myself as a coach or a leader as being the one who has to have it all figured out, that's just, it's really hard to be in that spot. And I think all of us have that, right? Like all of us, I've never been around a good coach who doesn't have an ego. I've never been around a good leader who doesn't have an ego. So it's like, no, I want you to be confident. The ego.
It's more self-confidence.
Yeah.
For me, I think that's the distinction for me is it's self-confidence over egotism.
Yeah. I think when we recognize that ego is there for a reason, it's to protect us. We just need to recognize when that ego hijacks the process, right? And where it's overly protective at the expense of trying to grow and get better. I'll spend a lot of time talking with players about, okay, what is confidence? Confidence means I'm prepared. It means I'm ready for the challenge. It doesn't mean certainty. It doesn't mean that I've got this all figured out. It just means I'm ready for whatever's coming my way. And so I think as a leader, confidence should show up as in, hey, I'm ready for whatever challenges get thrown my way. Doesn't mean I'll nail it. Doesn't mean I'll be perfect. Doesn't mean I have all the answers. But it doesn't mean I'm prepared.
This is a Jamie Carroll question, by the way. with today's portal climate, what is one adjustment necessary for coaches to know when coaching a player?
Great question. So I think there's a few things that we've got to recognize. Let me back up real quick. So I think the portal, NIL, everything else, I don't think it's changed what the recipe for success is. I think great coaches, great teams have always had these principles. I think what it's done is exposed margins for error. It's exposed any inefficiencies we have. Because now I've got to build a relationship immediately. I can't take, well, by the time he's a junior or senior, we'll be in a good spot. Don't have time. I've got to be able to develop you immediately, not, well, by the time he's a junior or senior. And I've got to be able to select well, because I need to know that they're coming in ready for what they're going to face. It's just the 3 or 4 year buffer has just been removed. So I think I need to recognize that. I think then the second part of this is I think we have to be aware of where we fall into some lies we can tell ourselves. For example, in the portal, well, I need him to like me because he may leave. That's a lie we've been telling ourselves as coaches forever. I want the player to like it. Never ever plays out well for us. Now it does mean I have to be way more consistent how I speak truth to him. It does mean the player has to see progress. It does mean the player has to know you care about him. It does mean all those things which we've always known as coaches. It's just we have to do it immediately, as opposed to try to get them to like me. I still believe that and this goes for any human, if I feel cared for and challenged, I'm in. Like if I know that you care about me and you're getting me better, then I'm in. No matter the hard days, the easy days, whatever else. So I think it's just a matter of now I've got to be able to block out the noise. I got to reduce the stuff that doesn't matter. And I need to focus on that. I think the other part of this is just recognizing this is where the honesty piece comes into play. Everybody knows what people are making. Everybody knows and so I've got to be willing to have honest conversations. I've got to be willing to navigate the small conflicts. I just have to be able to do all those things where I think in the past I was able to avoid them, but they were stuck with me. The player didn't have an out. So I don't think the recipe's changed. I think it's just that the margin for error has gone way down and we have to be better as coaches and leaders.
Do you think it's more important now to hold kids to standards then?
Very much so. And I think more so than ever, because I think growing up before society took care of this generally. Now it doesn't necessarily. I think all of us, and this is not a knock on today's player. I think today's player is very much a product of us. Like it's us as parents and coaches. So it's to recognize though that the player has been the center of their world. The amount of money and time spent around travel ball and everything else, like that's just real. We have been able to go from school to school, player to player, team to team. You know, we've been able to just go, if it gets hard, be able to go somewhere else because there's opportunities. So those lessons haven't been taught by the time I get them in college. I'd go before that, whatever level. And so I have to see myself as a coach of having to teach those things. I think, again, this comes back to as a coach, knowing what is my job. Well, I think more than ever, my job is to teach standards and expectations and all those things. I think in the past, I could maybe think society took care of it. That's not the case anymore. So I better be really good at it. Now, I also have to know that I might get a little bit more resistance because maybe this is uncomfortable and it's like different, which is why my level of care has got to be through the roof. My level of being able to teach has to be off the charts because what I'm teaching is potentially counter culture. And they're going to get that message 22 hours a day. My 2 hours a day better be that much better to be able to drive these things home. So I think more so than ever we have to, and I think we have to be ready for some resistance as we navigate it.
Yeah, I've said it a lot. I think we've done this generation a disservice because it used to be it takes a village, but now it's like we're in a silo, but then we still throw them out in the real world, which is really hard.
Yeah.
By the way, they're coddled, and then it's like, boom, culture shock. Now you're out in the real world where the real world doesn't really care that much.
Well, and I think this is another example. You talk about winning in development, right? Like I think winning in development, where this for me shows up is understanding what is the long-term goal here. My job's to prepare people for whatever's next. That's my job as a coach. It's to prepare them for tonight. It's to prepare them for tomorrow. It's to prepare them for 3 years. It's to prepare them for what's next. And so if I teach those lessons, I sell out to those lessons. I don't believe, outside of some potential player usage, it doesn't cost you ball games. In fact, I think it increases your chances of winning. And sometimes as a coach, I may need to make the tough decision to give this young man an opportunity because I believe it's going to pay off down the road at the expense of somebody else. that's the only time where, in my mind, we potentially sacrifice winning for development. And I would argue we're selling out to winning because it's the things that matter more. So I haven't lowered the bar. I'm still challenging them. But I just know what's our ultimate goal here. I think as coaches, again, it's just good for us to be reminded at the end of the day, we want to still be playing at the end of the season. So that means we want to be playing our best baseball. That means everything I should be doing should be about leveraging this moment to prepare us for the next one. And if I have that in mind, I'm going to think about what does this player need? What does this team need? And I'm going to focus that way as opposed to potentially what do I need in order to get a good result right now, which is really hard for us as competitors.
What are the biggest difference between coaching in pro ball when you're in pro ball and now what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think it's funny because I'll tell people in a lot of ways nothing's changed, right? Like I'm walking alongside leaders, I'm helping them, I'm giving them perspective, I'm growing people, I'm still in the people business. The thing I miss is having a team, having a group of people that we got to get playing nice in the sandbox together, that are aligned around the same mission, that are dealing with the wonkiness of the day to day. And I do love having a result at the end of the night. I like having a win or a loss, and I don't have that, or the results are different. There's maybe not the immediacy of a win or a loss, but I think a lot of times the win or loss at the end of the night can paralyze us if my identity's jacked up. But in some ways, it can be really freeing to let me know, hey, you're on track, you're not on track. And hey, we're doing something that matters. Oh, and hey, let's learn from this to go tackle tomorrow. Like, those dimensions, those aspects are definitely missed in the current role.
Would you go back and change anything when you started consulting?
In terms of when I made that transition?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably because it wasn't what I intended to do. I mean, it was, this was never something I envisioned. So, end of 2019, new president, new GM. I get fired in the late November of 2019. Had helped to navigate through some transition, was asked to take my ball and go home, which, hey, 12 years in Pittsburgh, good run. So my wife said to me, hey, can you give me 6 months before you jump back in? Our youngest was still at home, good kid, has turned into a good young man, but he was tough on mom. He was a competitive son of a gun. And she said, can you give me 6 months? She said, I'd like a year from you, but can you give me 6 months? And we were blessed to be able to, I had a couple more years on my contract. So I'm like, sure. I'm thinking in my mind, I'm jumping right back in. We'll be good. Well, 3-4 months later, COVID happens. The world shuts down. We start just spending a lot of time together, enjoying it. And then I started having coaches and leaders in baseball, outside of baseball, start reaching out and say, hey, would you help me hire a pitching coach? Would you help me navigate this? Would you come in and spend time with my leadership team? So it wasn't anything I intended. It was something we just kind of did. And I thought it was like, okay, this is going to be a season of life until our until our youngest gets out of the house. Well, we're still doing it, 6-7 years later. And so I think going back, what I would have done differently is probably say, hey, if we're doing this, what's it going to be? Let's build this accordingly and start to the same things that you do if you're coaching, of saying, hey, what's definition of success? Hey, what are our core values? What are going to guide us? As opposed to just kind of evolve into that over time.
How do you handle that in pro ball? Because that's for me, controlling the controllables. A new regime comes in, you're probably going to lose your job. How do you handle that?
No, that's a great question. So we had organization made a decision to move on from Clint, which still love Clint. We still live together down here. We don't live together down here in Bradenton. Just love his heart, love what he did for Pittsburgh. Make a change there. Like a week later, the president might be getting a little bit of this timeline off, but Frank Coonley steps down. Frank, very driven, set standard for excellence, has impacted the game tremendously. The organization hires a president very quickly, and I'm flying up for some meetings, and I land in Pittsburgh, and Neil Huntington calls me, the GM. And he says, where are you? I said, I just landed in Pittsburgh. He said, well, you might as well jump on a plane, go home. I just got fired and you're next. I said to him, well, I'm in Pittsburgh. Where are you? He says, I'm in the office. So I went in and hung out with him, and Frank was packing up his office as well. And just awesome chance to kind of relive, over 12 years. And I think people forget, over Clint's 9 years in Pittsburgh, we were top 10 wins in baseball for almost a decade, with the bottom 2 payroll. And so it's just awesome to kind of relive some of that. But I then know this. Well, hire a new president. They're going to do a GM search. Was not named interim. So I know I'm getting fired. I'm not named interim. I'm like, okay, this is. And my wife and I talked about it because she said, hey, they're just hoping that you kind of hold down the fort until new person comes in. And I think this is one of those things that I think as leaders, we say all the time, hey, it's not about me, it's about your people, whatever else. It's like, okay, do you really believe it? And I just felt like in that time that it was my job to, because I wasn't the only one uncertain what was going on. There were a lot of people that were. And so it just felt like it's, hey, back to your point, control the controllables. I can't control what's going to happen. I can't control how do I show up every day for the people that I'm leading. I can't show up every day hey, as long as I'm here, I am stewarding this organization. And it's just sold out to navigating that. I think I learned a lot about what we say matters versus actually having to live it out. And when you focus on those things, it's amazing the different opportunities to impact people and all those things that show up as opposed to worrying, about myself.
That's a karma thing too.
100%.
Handle it the right way.
And not Clint Hurdle always says, honor the exit. Like there's people that came before me. There's going to be people come after me. It's not the Pittsburgh Kyle Starks. Like this organization's bigger than me. I was entrusted with a seat for a period of time. My job's to steward that. That it's not about me. And then ultimately that somebody else is coming behind and, to be able to look up and say, hey, did we leave it better than we found it? Are there lots of really good people? And it's awesome to see, Pittsburgh rebounding and playing some good baseball right now with a lot of people that were there when we were there.
Do you have any tips for the hiring process for somebody, for hiring new employees or bringing somebody new in?
Yeah, no, I love this question. And it's actually, in honesty, probably the first question I got when I started. I wasn't consulting, but a guy reached out and said, hey, I need to hire a pitching coach. I think we obsess over hiring when it comes to players, right? We obsess over recruiting. We obsess over scouting. But then when we start hiring coaches, we almost see it as like a burden I have to do. And so I think the first tip is I have to understand that my job is I have to always be looking for talent. And so because who I hire on my staff, way more important. Yes, ultimately we're going to be a product of the players that we bring into our program, but I have to get my hires right on my staff. I think a lot of times as coaches, we think, hey, assistant coach, hey, you know what the job is. Hey, we just assume way too much. And we think, hey, grown men, you're going to have, no, we're all human beings. We all need lead. And so when I see hiring as a huge opportunity as opposed to a burden, it just changes. So I'm always looking. Every coach I interact with is a potential, hey, could be, couldn't be. Hey, do you know somebody? We're always building that. So that's number one. And then from there, I think we've got to make sure that we've all parties involved are aligned in terms of what matters. We've got to make sure that we have pushed for clarity. What exactly am I looking for? It's amazing how many times I'll talk to a coach and they'll say, hey, I need to hire a pitching coach. I'm like, awesome. What are you looking for? Well, no, I have no idea what you're looking for. What matters to you? Have you made sense? Do you have a coaching philosophy? Do you have a pitching philosophy? What are you looking for? And so I've got to make sure I have clarity of what I'm looking for. Because if I have clarity, I've got a better chance of finding it. And then I've got to make sure I've got a process that increases the chances of finding that. I think a lot of times I'll talk to somebody and they don't even know what they're really looking for. Just generally, they're looking for a pitching coach. But even the ones who know, hey, I want a coach who does X, Y, and Z, I'll say, great. How are you going to figure out who that is? And it's like, well, in an interview, bad place to figure that out. Well, I'm going to talk to a couple of guys I know that know him. Hey, that's good. Are there other data points? Are there other ways of doing this? In a perfect world, I always like that if I'm bringing you in for an interview, then I'm good hiring you. I'm just trying to figure out which of these are the best fit. And then my time together in that interviewing process should be very much focused on, I think too often we spend time on philosophical, we just like to hear each other talk and say, well, I'm just about the players. Yeah, me too. I'm about the players. I just think it's important to, work fast, change speeds, and throw strikes. Me too. As opposed to, hey, tell me about if we can ask more, tell me about times. And I start to understand, how have you navigated situations? How would you navigate a situation? How have you navigated a kid that was resistant to what you had? How'd you navigate? Tell me about a kid that you didn't take the right process with. But I want to know, the best predictor of future performance is past performance. So I want to know what behaviors, what experiences, what decisions have you made? How have you learned from them? Way more important than us having a philosophical discussion on pitching or whatever.
What are some of the other data points maybe that you would look at?
Yeah, I think a great one is looking at track record. It's amazing to me when we hire guys and you
look at the stats.
Yeah, I mean, stats. I'm like, so and so got hired as a pitching coordinator of a major league team. I'm like, dude, their college team sucked on the mound. Like, what are we doing? Not that is the data point, because there's always extenuating circumstances, yes. but it would then lead to some questions. Because again, that just shows me that there's, hey, this guy's got good theory and or may talk good versus, no, he's a good coach. My experience with some of the best coaches I've ever been around would not be guys that you would bring on stage at an ABCA main clinic, are not guys that you'd bring in to talk to your organization, whatever else, but give them some players, they're going to get them better. And so I think looking at performance track records, a great one. I love looking at where have they been. Who's shaped them, who's influenced them. It's amazing, when people have been around good coaches and good programs, they end up being better coaches and, as you go through. So looking at that. And then I think the other part is just talking to some other people that have been around that person in the journey, whether that's, and again, in a lot of ways, ideally it's someone above, someone at the same level, and maybe somebody below, but to get this sense of, ultimately, if I'm just talking to one guy, that's his perspective, as opposed to, hey, we're starting to create some themes here as we talk to different people with some different data points with them.
When dealing with either coaches or players, how do you deal with maybe their strengths and then blending what they need to work on?
Awesome question. This is one that Jamie and I have chopped up over the years.
Jamie and I talk about it a lot.
Yeah, because I think, we'll go look at some waves. I think we'll say back in the day, I think it was fix your weaknesses, right? Like, you got to fix your weaknesses. I mean, more than anything, it was like, dude, you just got to, you go out and punch 10, you walk 1, but that 1 was in the 7. Like, we're going to talk about that 1, so fix our weaknesses. Then, as I think we've better understood development, as we've potentially just swung the pendulum, as whatever else, we're like, hey, strengths-based makes sense. And there's examples of this, right? Like Bobby Cox, who just passed, was legendary for, like, this guy, scouts in the minor league people tell me this guy does this well. Okay, let's put him in a position to be successful. I think you look at some of the greatest managers ever, they're like, you know what, this guy can't do this, but he can do this. I'm going to leverage the heck out of that. I'm going to put him in a position to be successful. But then we swing the pendulum too far the other way, right? And it's all about your strengths. Just do your strengths. And now we've got a generation potentially of players that are very one-dimensional, and or when we get punched back, I don't know where to go. Or if I don't have that one thing, where do we go? So I think my answer to this is it's a both and, right? And I think it does start from a strengths base. What does this person do well? We have to know that first and foremost. We want to build an identity around what people do well. We want confidence to be rooted in what they do well. We want our usage to be rooted in what they do well. However, we got to make sure weaknesses don't limit them or put ceilings on them or whatever else. And so those are where we need to be working on those things, because now if I have a player that can do 3 things well, we've increased our chances. Right. I think the 2 other thoughts with this. I think if you just think about from a development perspective, working on our strengths tends to be more energizing, motivating than just dwelling on our weaknesses, right? Because we can see greater gains and whatever else. So I think we need to factor that in. However, if we avoid the other, then we're going to be limited. And so one of the things we would use in Pittsburgh from a feedback perspective, and I think it reinforces this, is we got to hunt the good stuff. What do we do well? That builds confidence. Like, our strengths help us build confidence, but then we have to be honest about what can we get better at. and be honest about those things that we need to move forward, those build competence, right? Those raise my floor, which is the longer you go, the more that you realize development is way more about raising floors than it is necessarily ceilings, because it's more a matter of consistency at that point.
I think defense and base running for me the lowest hanging fruit right now.
100%. 100%. And as a leader, you know,
Because you
I've
can
got
work
a,
on those and get better at those without taking away from anybody's strengths. They can get better at base running and defense
well, and what
without
it does,
burying them mentally.
100%. And what it also reinforces for us, it reinforces some other really important things. We talk about winning and development. Like, dude, we talk all the time about winning games that shows up in that. We talk about team and getting in today's age where we're all selfish, not just players. We're all selfish. Well, how defensive base running is all about the team. Like, it's all about, and so there's ways to reinforce the very values that we're talking about that teams need to have. Defensive base running isn't as sexy. It isn't as you don't get paid. Whatever those things are. I know Jamie Carroll played 12 years in the big leagues, ended up making a lot of money because he sold out to those two things. And that's not just one example. But I've got a buddy who is an executive, and he and I used to always joke around about nobody cares about bunting until October.
Exactly. Until it
Nobody
counts.
cares about base running until October. Nobody cares about these things that show up. And this is why I think like college baseball is probably ahead of it, because every game means more. And so we've got to leverage these things. And I think that's where you see some of this focus on defensive base running probably a little bit better, not across the board, but in certain college programs, because they know it increases their chances of winning.
Especially at the end of the year.
Especially at the end of the year.
Yep.
Yep. I think that's the thing. The challenge for baseball, especially pro ball, is that we play 6 months of the year one way, and then we play a very different style of baseball for a month. And it's hard to reconcile those two things, because I get it for 6 months. Would you rather, what's more bang for your buck? Help this guy execute develop break on a breaking ball, or hold runners? No comparison. But in October, we may lose a playoff game because of that. And so it's recognizing this tension as a coach that I need to be. This is why I got to coach with the end in mind, right? I've got to be thinking about, am I preparing them for what's coming? Otherwise, I can't look up and be mad because we didn't work on it. The game exposed it.
What has your experience been with the ABCA convention?
You know, I love the ABCA convention. For me, it does a couple things. Number one, I mean, where else are you going to get 6,000, 7,000 baseball coaches together? So inevitably, it becomes a great reunion, right? I mean, meet new people, seeing old faces, you know, guys that were like, hey, we need to connect. Hey, you can be at ABCA? Yes. You know, so I think that's number one. I think number two is generally there is an environment of curiosity and wanting to get better. There's certainly an element of people trying to show you what they know and everything else, but there is, and whether that's in the main stage sessions, or whether that's the clinics that you guys have continued to expand on the side, or whether it's just a group of dudes getting together in a suite to chop something up, which sometimes is the most magical of the conversations. So this general spirit of curiosity, trying to learn and get better, I think is the other part of it. I think the third thing for me that it does for a lot of us, you know, if you're in a leadership position, you are constantly in a rat race of stuff. And the convention in some ways for me was always a time where, you know what, I'm going to go sit in the main stage and I'm just going to listen to 6-8 hours of ball talk and not deal with all the other stuff. Now I'm going to have to deal with it later, but it allowed me even less than just what somebody might be teaching from the stage. It gave me time to think about some of these topics deeper and start to wrestle with some of these things and challenge some convictions and whatever else. So I think it's a great time to connect with people. It's a great time to be curious. I think it's also a great time for yourself to step back, get off the treadmill, and think about, hey, where am I really with that? Not even so much get some new drills, because then we're just adding. I think it can be a great time to refine it and reduce as well.
You know, getting let go from the Pirates, probably a fail forward moment. Do you have any other fail forward moments? Something you thought was going to set you back, but looking back now helped you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's moments throughout. I think being told, "Hey, you're not going to be good enough to play at this level, so you got to pivot and figure something out." Which again opened up a career in a front office. I think so. When I went away to college, felt like I got a better opportunity to play volleyball than baseball. That didn't play out, blew out my ankle. So it's like, okay, you got to pivot, which again was another data point to push into this front office realm. I think inevitably when you're in a leadership position, you try different things, and some things work, some things don't. We did 2 days of team development, leadership development in instructional league the one year with some Navy SEALs, got shredded, crucified in the industry. And now like every organization's got a Navy SEAL working for them. So it's really cool. And for me, it wasn't that we did it, but we were first through the door, which I wore some things for it. But I think for me, it was more how I rolled that out and or how I managed up. I could have managed up way better. I think a lot of times I fell into a trap of, well, if I just deliver well, it doesn't matter. So, you still got to manage up. You still got to put your boss in a good position to be successful. You still need to be you got to follow well. So there were some, fail forward moments with that along the way. I think the other one for me is parenting, in all honesty. I think, you talk about coaching, it's hard to coach if you haven't parented. Like they're just every day they're reminding you of where you've not done a good job with that. And, trying to figure that out where there is definitely wisdom and guidance from other people. And there's lots of books that have studied it. But like this, you talk about art and science, there's way more art. And so I think that, parenting along the way certainly does that. I'll give you a quick story on that. My first year in Pittsburgh, I think it was my first year in Pittsburgh, I just felt like I needed to be everywhere. And so I was on the road a ton. And I'd been out, was going to be out for like another week or something. I'm like, you know what? I can get home for 24 hours and see the family. I'm going to be a good father and husband. Well, I reroute, get home for 24 hours and spend the day. And our youngest at the time was 2. Yeah, 2. And the next morning I'm getting up, I'm going to the airport, and he comes out and he says, "Hey, can I go in the office with you?" I said, "Actually, buddy, I'm leaving town." 2-year-old melts down crying. I'm like, I'm the worst father ever. But it was reminding me again in terms of just, hey, when we think we're doing good versus are we actually doing good, and how do we navigate some of those things? I think parenting's some great fail forward moments.
How do you navigate that grind though as a parent in professional baseball?
It's a
I've got
great
guys that are coaching right now that have young kids in it, and they're dealing with it right now. Like it's been a struggle. Some of them haven't seen their family since January.
No question. And what I would say to coaches and leaders in this, number one, you've got to see it as a calling, and it can't just be a job. If it's a job, even if it's a career, it's not work. You can't make sense of it. And not just you, but your wife and kids have to see it as a calling. There's some things in my family we missed out on. There's some really cool moments our family got a chance to experience because of the world that we have lived. I think the other part of it is for those of us who are definitely in leadership positions, a head coach, whatever else, it's for us to be honest with ourselves. There's always something else you can do. So we got to let go of that and say, at the end of the day, I need to find not this idea of balance, because I think balance, we start to think about like the scales of justice. That's not real. But I do want to be in alignment with my values. And so are there times where I can push to say, you know what? Hey, nobody in the office until whatever time. Hey, bring the families to the ballpark at the end of practice. Hey, but to fight for that time in alignment with my values, not for balance. I don't think any the good marriages I've seen, I don't think the wives are expecting balance. I think they are expecting the husband to not just say, hey, you're on the back burner until, because here's the other part of it too. Okay, you're on the back burner until June, July. Well, recruiting. Well, fall before we know it, fall balls. And it's like you're always on the back burner. So it's the ability, again, coming back to what we were talking about before, get rid of stuff that doesn't matter as much. There's always something I can be doing. I need to be at peace with that. And then ultimately say, hey, I want to be in alignment with my values, which means my family's got to be a part of this, and I got to fight for that.
Yeah, I spoke to a college class the other day, and one of the first questions was work life balance. I said it's not
Okay.
a thing.
That's what
I said, hey, that is not a thing. Like, if you want to be in any sort of athletic industry, that is not a thing. Maybe when you're older, I said, but then Jimmy Onati is a good friend. He was on the call too. He said it's just life. Like,
yes.
it's not work-life balance. It's just life. There's always
Yeah.
going to be things at certain times that are out of whack of something else. That's just life. It's not a
Yeah.
work-life balance. That's just life.
I had early in my time, I had a mentor say to me, because he challenged me because it was stupid hours, and I probably was out of whack. Um, and he challenged me, and he said, he mentioned balance. And I said, I've never been around somebody elite who's balanced. I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah,
So
it's not a thing. They
now
are
fight
wired for it in the best
100%.
possible way. Wired
Yep.
for it.
Usually, if you end up in these positions, you probably have a higher capacity. You probably rhythm differently. You probably are. And so, how am I leveraging those things? I think it's just a matter of if I'm going to be a father and a husband, I need to commit to those responsibilities.
Yep.
And that means I got to fight for things that I may have to be creative. I may need to give in a certain spot. I've told people before, there's no question in my mind. I could say that being a father and a husband made me a worse leader because I couldn't dedicate as much time and energy. At the same time, I've told people there's no doubt in my mind I'm a better leader because I was a father and a husband, because I just understood people. I understood relationships. I understood people. I understood love way better there than I ever was going to understand if I was just coaching and leading.
When did the light bulb go on, or who nudged you to get the Navy SEALs involved?
So a part of this was when we got hired in Pittsburgh, we just knew we were going to have to do it different. And so there's a sports psychologist, Dr. Cook wrote 7 Days in the Links of Utopia, really good. Somebody that's looking for a sports psychology book, really good book. He talks in there about truth over tradition, that tradition can be a vision killer. And so we said, hey, we're going to pursue truth. Doesn't mean we're going to shun tradition. Like there's certain things that have been done a certain way for 100 years for a reason. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel, but let's make sure we're constantly pursuing truth. And so as we settled into this, we said, again, come back to people are people, excellence is excellence. Well, let's look at who's doing good things in good spaces. So some of that was in baseball. Some of that was other sports. Like I think there's a lot. I had a conversation with a Hall of Fame football coach who said, you know what, I think baseball should coach a little bit more like football, and football should probably coach a little bit more like baseball, balancing that urgency and patience piece. So we started looking at other sports. We started looking at education. We started looking at corporate space and companies that are just legendary. They're just killing it, have built great cultures. And we looked at the military. We looked at, in my mind, if you're the best in the world at something, I want to know what you're doing. And then we decide what works for us, what doesn't. If I'm just copying you, then that's not good leadership. But if I say, hey, they do this really well, okay, what would that look like for us? It made a lot of sense. So out of that, whenever I was on the road somewhere, which is all the time, is I'd look somebody up in an area and I'd go spend some time with them. After a few years of doing that, I'm like, you know what? We should bring people to us. I mean, we're a Major League Baseball organization. And so we started doing these think tanks each year where we'd bring in 30 to 50 high-speed leaders and performers from all those different worlds. And then we would spend 2 days chopping these things up. And so we had a group from NSW came out, and they loved it. Then they came out every year. We did one. They'd send a contingent when we'd be out there. They'd want to. It became a best practices sharing of ideas, and I was always intrigued by their ability to build team and develop leaders. And so I'm like, okay, let's. So we had a couple guys, some retired and some active guys that came out and spent 2 days. Great. I mean, it was just awesome to see some of the things we thought play out in real time and watch some of these guys emerge, some of these guys not emerge, some guys, quite a few guys that are still playing in the big leagues. And it was a great 2 days of giving our players a taste of something different. So it wasn't just us talking about them. A little bit of a confidence builder to say, hey, dude, we just trained with some Navy SEALs. And for us for our coaches to continue to see some best practices in a different environment to say, okay, hey, I can take that. Hey, I saw how he interacted with that young man. So it became a great learning experience for all of us.
How'd you fill the void with your time when you got out of professional baseball? Because I can't imagine the hours or anything close to what you were doing.
No, it is not. Part of it is I'm still on the road a decent amount because most of the work I'm doing is going to. I know Zoom and everything else. We can shrink it. I prefer to spend time with people. So I'm still on the road a decent amount, but not near as much. And the hours are way different. And so I've filled them in with two things. One, probably spend a little bit more time on me than I used to. I always felt like, hey, if my people deserve my best, so I need to make sure I'm taking care of me. But there's a difference between that level and no, I've got some time to maybe explore this or maybe learn this or whatever. The second one, and it's the huge one for me, has been my family. I've just been able to do more things with my family. And the cool thing now is the flexibility is like I was just in Dallas working with a group and was able to see our oldest son. And then we went to South Carolina and worked with a college football program and was able to see our youngest son. So we've been able to do more of that together, my wife and I.
What have been some new skills you've picked up?
I think for me, I'll give you a specific skill and then a general approach. I think the specific skill was that I did an executive coaching course specifically aimed at growing not the skill of coaching the way we're talking, but the art of coaching. And it was really good for me as a guy who's more of a type A personality, tell them let's go, as opposed to, hey, ask some good questions. I think we can overplay that as well. I see it in organizations where it's like, dude, just tell them the answer. We don't need to keep this asking questions. But it has helped me be more patient as I've helped a leader work through something as opposed to just, hey, I'm going to fix this problem for you. And then generally for me, it has been just doing some things where don't feel like I'm in control. Because I think as leaders, we forget that. We forget what that feels like. I think as coaches, we forget what that feels like. And so whether that's, getting my motorcycle license, my oldest rides motorcycle, just, to go do something that I did scuba with my youngest, just to do something that, hey, whether I really want to or not, it's going to get me out of my comfort zone and get me out of where I'm in control and force me to remember what that feels like.
What are some final thoughts or something I should have asked you that I didn't?
Yeah, you've been awesome, Ryan. I think we've covered a lot of things. I think the big thing that I would want to encourage coaches is in this landscape. I think coaching's never been more needed. I think the bar has never been higher. The recipe has not changed. I think the things we'd identify as great coaches that have impacted us from a generation ago, those still would be great coaches. So the recipe hasn't changed. And I think more than ever, we have to evaluate are we controlling the controllables or are our uncontrollables controlling us? I just think it's really easy for us to look up and say the landscape's controlling us, society's controlling us. And even in pro ball as well, where it's like this, our career path is like, well, as soon as we start saying they say this matters, I think we just need to challenge ourselves to say, do I agree with that or not? And am I leading from a place that ultimately is in alignment with my values, what matters to me? Doesn't mean, because I think a lot of times we can fall in this trap where we've got to get out or we got to be somebody different. No, I think you can still be a really good coach in this landscape, but we've got to be that much more intentional about working from the inside out as opposed to the outside in, because margins for error are going to be exposed, lack of resource, whatever it is, demands on our times are going to be exposed. Those things are all threats, and I've got to be that much better at really leading myself so I can go lead others.
Yeah, extreme ownership.
Yep.
Goes in anti-fragile.
Yep, very much so.
Yep.
Very much
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited about
awesome.
this. I appreciate you.
I enjoyed chopping
Thank
it
you.
up. Thanks, Ryan.
Love it.